What's up, guys? Hope everybody's doing well and having a great day. In this video, we're going to revisit a video I posted back in 2019. Some of you may have seen this video, some of you may have not. It involves an ancient tree stump, or a hypothetical ancient tree stump, super massive at that I found on Google Earth over in Madagascar. And what led me there, or at least got me started, was this surface feature up here in northeastern Wyoming known as the Devil's Tower, that a lot of people, including myself, thinks looks like a petrified tree stump, and it does. It's quite large, much like the surface features you're going to see over in Madagascar that we're going to take a closer look at, because I've found some new evidence that supports the theory that these may at one time have been tall trees, and what's left is what we see on Google Earth. And I want to get right to that. We're going to go over to Madagascar. I have a folder right here. I'm going to show you guys the new things that I found over in Madagascar that look very similar to a tree. And again, what led me there was I was studying this surface feature in northeastern Wyoming that definitely looks like a petrified tree stump. But anyway, here we go. I've got some new things that I want to show you guys. We're going to go over to Madagascar right here on Google Earth. To be honest with you, I scoured the entire Earth via Google Earth. It took me about 2 weeks to cover all the continents, and the best examples I found of potential old tree stumps were right here in Madagascar. And as you can see in the northern part of Madagascar, here's what looks like an old tree stump. Right here's another one. Right here's another one, and some of the new evidence that I'm going to show you guys support tree color. I'm going to show you guys some new features on the ground that look like tree branches, and in fact they look like cedar tree branches, a very specific kind of tree, that there were once possibly giant cedar trees that stood over here who knows how long ago. But right there's 3 good examples of what I think, and again this is all just hypothetical, of what I think are old tree stumps. And these rivers that we see were the tree's primary source of water. Coming over here to the west side of Madagascar, there's some other examples of what look like old tree stumps. Here's one here that's nearly perfectly round. We're going to come over and take a closer look at that one. There's another one right there that's not quite as obvious. Going just north of that example, here's another one, looks like an old coin laying there on the ground. Then there's another example or 2 up in this area, but these aren't quite as easy to see. When I did the video back in 2019, several people were commenting that the whole southern half of Madagascar looks like one giant tree laying here. And it does if you zoom in and take a closer look at the geography of the southern part of Madagascar. You could see what looked like tree bark, parts of a tree laying here on the ground, a petrified tree. But yeah, the colors are there, the surface features are there. I totally agree. In fact, I took screen grabs I want to share with you guys real quick of South Madagascar, and I did some modifications to the color and whatnot to pull forward those colors that do look like wood, old wood laying there on the ground. That's one example right there. And this next example is very heavily modified, but you can see again what looks like an old tree in the middle, and even branches and green leaves and stuff off to the sides. But a lot of people commented in that last video that I did about how the south part of Madagascar looks like a large tree. But I want to focus on the north part of Madagascar. In fact, to be very specific, this location right here. I found some new evidence that supports the tree theory. Again, this is hard to wrap your mind around, and I want to measure real quick just to show you guys how large the surface feature is over here in northern Madagascar. Here we go. Just over 8 miles wide. I mean, that is staggering. It's hard to wrap your mind around that this right here is 8 miles wide. So how tall, if this is indeed the leftovers of a tree, this is a tree stump, how tall would the tree have been? I'm going to show you guys something over here that looks identical to a tree. I'm going to show you guys some things on the ground that look identical to tree branches. So, I mean, it looks like all this stuff that you're going to see here on the ground at one point in time were living organisms. Look at all these things over here. And this is for you guys that have never seen this video. To me, what I'm looking at here, and again, this is all hypothetical, these look like tree branches. To be specific, cedar tree branches. And here's an example of cedar tree branches. They look similar, if not identical, to what we're seeing on the ground all around the base of what looks like a tree stump right here. If it is a tree stump, then that was one very tall tree, and these are the branches that fell off the tree by one means or another. I don't know how. That again is all hypothetical, but look at these things. And right here is another area of very good examples of what look like cedar tree branches. See the similarities? I mean, I am 100% convinced that's what we're looking at here. These are petrified cedar tree branches. Look at this one here, how it's curved, like maybe it landed like that and it just laid there in that curved position, and that's how it petrified. Because I think the surface of the ground is right here, and that was formed by erosion, different things like that. I don't think erosion caused this. I think this was once a living organism, and now it's petrified on the ground over here in Madagascar. And these things, again, are littered all around the base of this structure here, this structure right here. If you look around close, you'll see examples of what look like tree branches. Here we go. Again, those look like they were once living organisms, and they're laying on the ground all around the base of what I'm describing as a tree stump, an old tree stump. But those are everywhere. I could show you countless examples of those things. And after I'd studied this area for a long time, I was so convinced that those were indeed tree branches that I took a screen grab of one of the locations, one of the many locations, and I had this canvas made of what looked like tree branches on the ground in Madagascar. And these things are quite large. To give you an example of how large some of these branches are, here's what I did. I used the Empire State Building as a baseline to measure one of these tree branches that are laying on the ground over there, or at least a hypothetical tree branch. And this is as tall as the Empire State Building. Look at that, side by side. That's how big what you're seeing on the ground are over here in Madagascar are. Some of these things are over 1,000 feet long, and to me they look like they were once living organisms. And again, they're all over the place over here. But back to the hypothetical tree stump. I want to show you guys what I found over here along the northern edge of this hypothetical tree stump. Let me get organized here. We're going to zoom in and take a closer look at this side right here. And I'm going to show you guys the stunning similarities to a tree. Check this out. We're going to go in real close. There's another branch right there, just laying on the ground plain as day, or at least it is to me. Okay, here we go. Now we're kind of on the ground. You can't get a ground view over here because there's no roads. We're going to zoom in to this location here. See the color? And see what looks like tree bark, petrified tree bark. Maybe this area here was protected from the direct sunlight, quite possibly erosion and things like that, and this still remains. See how that looks like tree bark? See the color over here that looks like the inside of a tree? I'm going to show you guys some examples of a tree that look almost identical to what we're seeing right here. See the similarities? Almost identical. This is a tree from just a few months ago, and this is over here on the ground in Madagascar. I have another example of tree bark. This would be from a cedar tree. What we're potentially looking at here, a possible old cedar tree. See the similarities? Almost identical, right? Look at that. Almost identical. And this over here on the right is unedited. I just found an example of cedar tree bark, and there it is. They look almost identical, kind of like the things that we're seeing on the ground littered all around the base of this very large structure here, what look like cedar tree branches. So we've got the base that looks like cedar tree bark, just in some areas that may have been protected from erosion and direct sunlight, but there's examples of cedar tree branches all over the place around this area. So when I did the video back in 2019, I did not see that area right there until, just like I said, a few days ago. I just ran across that. But here's another close-up view of what was once a very tall tree. This is one example of a few examples of potential trees, giant trees that are over in Madagascar. Here's another example of what looks like tree bark. See the similarities? Looks like tree bark. And as we move from this location here, which was the most obvious, you can see other examples down here along this northern edge. And I think this side was protected once again from the direct sun and quite possibly the wind and erosion. I don't know, but you can see better examples of what look like tree bark along this northern edge. Right here's another example of the color that we see in trees today all over the earth. There's another example right there of the dark tan and light tan right there. See it? Right there's a tree from just a few months ago. You can see the similarities. They're totally obvious to me. I think this was at one time in history. I don't know when. And again, this is just hypothetical, me thinking outside the box. Look right here. Look at the similarities. Doesn't that look like tree bark? Obviously petrified tree bark. And then here's tree bark over here on the right. They're almost a perfect match. So to me, I was convinced the first day I saw this, and I studied it for an entire day that led to 2 weeks before I put together a video, and I was completely convinced. And I'm even more convinced to this day. I keep coming over to this area. I think this is one of the most fascinating places on earth. This is the north side of what looks like to me an old tree stump. If you go around to the south side, which we can, I'll show you guys the south side, and this is exposed to the direct sun pretty much all the time, so you don't see the very defined bark patterns like you see on the other side of what could potentially be a large tree stump. You do see examples of those cedar leaves on the ground over here in just a few places, not very many. And then right here, here's another example of those vertical lines, but you can tell by looking at this side here, it's exposed to the direct sunlight, but it does have similarities to the bark pattern of a cedar tree. See it right there? But you can tell that this side has been exposed to direct sunlight and quite possibly wind and erosion. So this side over here isn't quite as obvious as the north side. But to me, this is just more evidence that supports the theory that this is an old tree stump from a very large tree that once stood on planet Earth long, long ago. And again, if you extend out in all directions and look around the base of what looks like a tree stump, or at least it does to me, you can see multiple examples of these branches all over the place. Here's another example, and these are quite large as well, but see the similarities? They look just like cedar tree branches laying on the ground all around the base of what could be ancient tree stumps over in Madagascar. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I wanted to check out this large, what looks like a circle over here. Reminds me of yet another tree stump right here along the west side of Madagascar. And as we go in a little bit closer, you can see the interior of this giant ring that is many miles wide. Looks like organic matter. It looks like dirt, maybe petrified wood. You can see some trees growing in here. Looks like organic matter. And the ring around this thing is nearly perfect in circumference. Look at this thing. And we'll take a quick measurement of this one too, just to get an idea of how big it is. And like the other one, over 9 miles wide. The other tree stump that we measured was just over 8 miles wide. So these things are huge, whatever they may be. I don't think this is volcanic in nature. To me, this looks like it was once a very large living organism. This one here doesn't have the features like the other one does with regard to tree bark and things like that. This one over here is very weathered and worn, and everything inside this giant, nearly perfect circle that I agree looks like a cone of a volcano. However, it doesn't have any height to it. The sides are all about the same. They go up, I don't know, maybe 1,000 feet all the way around this thing. So it's very similar with regard to the height of this ring, nearly perfect circle. You go into the interior and everything looks organic. You have trees growing around. You have what looks like bushes and dirt. There's evidence of brush fires in here in certain locations, like right there. You can see there was a brush fire over here along the northern edge. There's a couple of areas, I think, right down in here. There's evidence of a brush fire. Over here, there's a lot of evidence of brush fires because of the organic matter inside this big circle that also looks looks like yet another giant tree stump over here on the west side of Madagascar. Here's evidence of a large circle on the ground that could have been a large living organism many years ago. And there's another one right over here. Actually, there's two here, but this one here is the more obvious of the two. This one here to me looks organic in nature. The circle is just too perfect in circumference. It looks like it was something that was a living organism many years ago. I think this one, like over here in the north central part of Madagascar, these two could have very well been some sort of living organisms long ago. Feel free to come check it out yourself. Take a look around. You'll see the examples of the branches, and you'll see what looks like tree wood over here along the northern edge of what could have been a giant tree long ago. The south side's a little more weathered, but the north side seems to be a little more preserved of what could have been very tall giant trees in Madagascar. Thanks for watching. Have a super day and be safe out there.